So in this new unit, right, we're moving on to a brand new unit, talking about spreadsheets and budgeting. And this will be one of the more important units that we talk about. It's the last one we're talking about, obviously. But spreadsheets, learning how to use spreadsheets, kind of like you see on the left, um, is an underrated skill, and it's something that could really put you ahead of the curve in college and beyond in your professional lives if it's something that you start to get under your belt. So I think this is one of the more important things that I'm going to show you, and it's one of those things that once you get comfortable with it, it can go right on your resume, and it stands out to a lot of employers. So eventually we're kind of working our way up to talking about budgets, but to start, we're going to talk about just how to navigate your way around a spreadsheet. So the first thing we should talk about is what a spreadsheet even is. So all a spreadsheet is, make some bullets here, a spreadsheet is just a digital table of data. It's not all supposed to be underlined. Spreadsheet is a digital, can't spell, table of data. This data isn't necessarily just numerical, so I'll say it's not just numerical. You can use a spreadsheet to organize just about anything. In any way, in any sort of degree of complexity as you're comfortable with and as you see fit. So I'll say with any degree of complexity. I can have the simplest spreadsheet with maybe just like your name. Maybe I want to track like your name and phone number. So I track like your name and then like your phone number, right? I could do that, right? That's it, but it organizes it nicely. Um, I could have just a list of numbers, right? Maybe it's just like something like this, and then like some more numbers, whatever it means. However I choose to organize it, my spreadsheet is just meant to be some kind of an organizational tool, and an incredibly powerful one. Spreadsheets are organized into rows and columns. I'll underline those also. So obviously rows are horizontal, columns are vertical. So you might notice something right away. You probably notice that rows are named by number. They're assigned number. Columns are named by letter. Right? So I have column C and I have row 9, right? Well, at the intersection of column and row, I have these individual boxes, So something like this, right? That individual box is called a cell. They're called cells. And we name them in a very specific order, and they are named column, row. So for example, I could have, well, I'm sitting here at column C, row 9, right? So this is cell C9. But any sort of combination of column row, right? D2, E11, F22, whatever you want, kind of just goes together for as many rows. As you can see, this goes on and on and on and on. Some spreadsheet softwares have infinite columns as well. I guess this is a good time to mention that different types of spreadsheet software we have, or programs that we have, include the one that we're working on right now, which is Google Sheets, Microsoft Excel, and Apple's suite is called Numbers. These all pretty much work the same way. Format, like design is different, maybe the user interface is different, but the core formulas, the core syntax, the kind of grammar of the whole thing works just as well, just as easily in all three programs. I've used all three and had no trouble switching from one program to the next. So what can I do with the spreadsheet? Well, of course, like I said, I could have any sort of data. So I could have numerical data. I could have words, right? So maybe I have categories like blue, green, red, yellow, I don't know. And maybe I have some different numerical data that I want to work with. So maybe I have like 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 2, 14, 11, 0, 3, 6, 8. Maybe I have, I don't know, 1, 9, 7, 13. This is all great, but is there something I can do with it? Maybe I want to do something more with it. Um, well, there is, and if I want to make this a little more complicated, maybe I need to total things up. Maybe I need to work with these numbers in some way. We have different formulas we can use. So formulas are commands that tell the spreadsheet what to calculate, which data or cells to use in the calculation, and where to represent or where to present it. Formulas, in my experience, are the things that tend to scare people away from Excel because they can look really tricky. They can look really complicated. If I pull up, I don't think I have anything offhand that I can pull up that's not like sensitive to show you. But formulas can get really complicated, right? I can have a formula that looks very much like something like this equals, I don't know, maybe sum if this, maybe I have equals green, and I want it in something like this, right? This is a formula, and it's maybe a little scary looking because you don't know what it means, you don't know how to read it. This is still a less complicated ones than some that I've seen in other places. I've seen some pretty crazy looking formulas in some other programs that I've worked with, some other people that I've worked with. But it's really not bad once you learn how to speak the language. Just like anything else in math, the trick is learning how to speak the language. So let me set this in because oh, maybe not. So let's learn how to speak the language. So we'll talk about writing a formula. And kind of learning the grammar, speaking the language. I can't spell tonight, the language. The first rule of formulas is that all formulas must start with an equal sign. The way I like to think about this is, let's say you're over here, right? And I'm putting my formula, I'm going to do something in cell E2. I want to put a formula here. The way I like to think about this is if I'm starting a formula in cell E2 and I'm starting with an equal sign, it's almost like I'm saying, kind of as if you're saying, it's almost like I'm saying, well, whatever I do here, E2 is going to be equal to whatever formula I put in. Maybe that formula is something like just A1 plus A2. Right? It's kind of like what I'm saying here, but I don't need to write this first bit because I'm putting it in that cell. So all formulas I type into a cell just start with equals. Have to start with an equal sign every time. Switch my color back. There's a long list of predefined options. So I'm going to say for now, you can't really create your own formula, but programs provide hundreds, literally hundreds of preset or predefined formulas to use, as well as the 4 basic operations, which are addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Notice that I'm using the, oh, maybe I should put a different color here. The star for multiplication, that's the star I have to use. That's the symbol I need to use for multiplication. If I try to multiply 2 items together, if I come back over here, if I were to type in something like, I don't know, equals A2 X B3 or C3, it's going to get mad at me. If I use the star, it returns the correct result. So I can use these 4 basic operations. And the other thing I need to do is refer to some cell or some number. So formulas involve say calling cells, naming cells, and or numbers, or even in some cases ranges of cells. And I'll talk about what that means in a minute. But let's talk about dealing with these 4 basic operations here first. 4 basic operations, right? If I just wanted to add up, I don't know, this first row, I could kind of do this the long way by saying, well, I'm going to add up all of these cells, right? Here's cell A2, and I'm going to add B2, and C2, whoops, C2, and D2, and D2, and I'll press enter, and it returns my result. And sure enough, 2 plus 3 is 5, plus 4 is 9, plus 5 is 14. If I wanted to multiply everything here by 2, or maybe I just wanted to multiply the first entry in the third row by 2, I could. Right? I want to take the first entry in the third row, so A3, and multiply it by 2. I can do that. I can divide if I wanted to. If I wanted to divide cell B4 by C6, I can. Oh, what don't you like about that? Oh, I'm looking at the entry 6. This is C4, sorry. So you can tell that they're very picky. And if I wanted to, I don't know, I wanted to subtract 5 from a cell, I could, right? I could D5 minus 5 gives me my answer. So I can play around with the basic operations. But I can do some more dynamic things too, and I can do some things in maybe some more shorthand that makes my work more efficient. So let's start talking about some common formulas. If we're going to start learning how to speak the language, you need to know the vocabulary. Right? If you start to learn a new language, the first couple verbs you learn, right? To be, to have, to do, things like this. These are kind of your verbs in this language of writing formulas. So the first formula that we're going to talk about is sum. And notice that I started with an equal sign, so that way you get in that habit as well. And sum is going to take something inside of it, so it's always parentheses after. The way we can to read these formulas is equals tells the spreadsheet that I'm starting the formula. This is the name of the formula, so in this case sum. And then here is what we call the argument. It's the thing that I'm telling the spreadsheet to do the sum on. Right? So we're going to call this the range of the cells. So as you can imagine, this is obviously going to return the sum of a defined range of cells. I have to tell it what to add up. So there are a few different ways that we can actually define our range. Express the range of cells. And it all depends on what I want to do, right? It all depends on what I want to, or which cells I want to work with, what cells I want to operate on. That's what I'm trying to say. So some different ways I can do this. One way I can do this is to say with a colon, right? A1 colon A4, and we're going to read this as A1 to A4. And this is going to mean, I'll do the definition in different colors so it kind of sticks out and you don't get confused with the symbols. So A1 to A4 is going to just define all the cells in the column from A1 to A4. Right? So if I wanted to add up this block of cells in the column, I can do that. Right? This would be equals sum. In this whole range, the first cell I'm concerned with is A2 all the way to A5. And one of the great things about Google Sheets is that you can see it highlights what you're talking about, so you can make sure you're doing it correctly. I'm going to close my parentheses and press enter, and it returns my result. And I could do this in any cell, right? I could do equals sum, B2 to B5, and so on. Okay, so the next thing I can do this with a row too. So I can do A1 to D1. And just as my first example talked about a column, this is going to talk about a row. In the row from A1 to D1. So if I go over here now, I want to add these up, say, well, I can do that. I want to go from A2 all the way to D2. Oops, D2. And it does that. I can want to go from A3 all the way to D3. I can do that, and so on. Now you might be wondering how you could put these together. You absolutely can. And maybe I want to go from A1 to D4. Well, what this is going to do, and actually I'll show you first. If I want to add up all of these, I want to think about this like a rectangle. I want to think about this as a rectangle that goes, you can't see my finger, I don't know why I'm physically pointing at the screen. You want to go from cell A2 all the way diagonally down. I'm kind of stretching this rectangle out to cell D5, right? So just the way I clicked and dragged it, right? A2 to D5. And that's what this notation is talking about. Sure enough, if I do sum A2 to D5, you see it highlight. Right? This is what I'm concerned with, this entire thing. So kind of in words, the way I'm going to write this out is this is going to talk about all the cells in the rectangle. Figure out the way I'm going to word this, or I'll say in the region formed by the rectangle, right? You saw that it formed kind of a box, a rectangle, whose top left corner is A1 and bottom right corner is D4, which is what you see here, right? The top left corner is A2, the bottom right corner is D5, and that's what that A2 to D5 means. One last one really quickly. So that's kind of how you work with a colon. If I want to work with a comma, like this, A1, C3, D4, this is going to talk about specific cells. So add the cells A1, C3, and D4. This is the same as saying equals A1, well, in the case of a sum anyway, this is the same as saying A1 plus C3 plus D4. All right, if I said just equals sum A1, B2, I can't do A1, that's not a number, A2, B3, and D4. I can do that. I can pick and choose the cells that I want, and you can see that it highlights them, so I know I'm doing it correctly. So kind of different ways to start working with these cells, start calling these cells. So we've learned about the sum formula. A couple more simpler ones we're going to talk about in this section. Oops. Is average. And again, that's going to accept a range of cells, as you can imagine. This is going to return the arithmetic mean. So we're talking about the mean when we talk about average here, not necessarily the median or something. Arithmetic mean of a range of cells. And you might be asking yourself, how do I pick that range of cells? This is all still valid. Everything we just talked about is all still valid. So maybe I want to find the average, get rid of my sums here. Maybe I want to find the average of this row. I can do that, the average from A2 to D2. Maybe I want to find the average of the entire thing. So average of, shortcut I can click and drag, which is nice, A2 to D5. I can do that. I can also do this with the standard deviation, except we're going to abbreviate it STDEV. I should have an equal sign. So STDEV for standard deviation. that's also going to accept a range. So you're starting to see that we're using kind of the same format throughout, right? Pick the same color. We're using the same the same format throughout. Function, range, function, range, function, range. This will return the standard deviation of a range of cells. So same deal, maybe I found the range, I want to find the standard deviation, and I want to do that of that column I just talked about, so it's A2, D2. There it is, right? Just shrink this a little bit so you can see it all. I want to find the standard deviation of the whole set here. I can do that. There it is. This is something that I actually use a lot every time I give tests and quizzes, or I try to find like an exam scale for you guys on a final or a midterm. I go right to my spreadsheet, I enter all the data in, and I use these commands, these functions, every single time. It's a really great tool to start getting used to. It can be overwhelming at first, but I promise it's not nearly as scary as it looks.